I don't blame guys for having, their guard up. And one of the things I talk about a lot, and this has become a passion of mine, especially with the research that we're seeing of adverse childhood experiences, emotional, childhood neglect, and how it affects our parenting and our lives, is that whenever you get an emotion from your child, from a friend, from whoever, view it as a gift. Whether it's a positive emotion or a negative emotion, you just received a gift.
Welcome to Authentic Conversations. I'm your host, Ryan James Miller, and I believe the way to freedom, fulfillment, and success ultimately comes by living as the most authentic version of yourself. If you're ready to live the life you've dreamed of, you're in the right place. All right. Well, what up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the podcast. So if you are watching, if you've been tuning in, paying attention, particularly if you've been watching online, but I guess if you've been listening to this second season of the podcast, I don't know, at this point, we're probably 30 episodes in or something like that. You're looking right now and you're like, what in the heck is Ryan doing? Because Ryan's been talking nearly exclusively to men over the course of this season. And right now you're looking at a wonderful woman. If you are watching this on YouTube, if you're listening, you would be if you were watching. So you just have to know that. And you're thinking to yourself, like, why would this happen? Well, it just so happens that I was introduced to Christine Bright by way of another friend that felt like it would just be a great conversation for us to have. Christine is a certified parenting coach. And so we're going to dig into that a little bit more. And as we got talking, there were a couple of things that came up and I thought, oh man, that would be so great to talk about on the podcast. So that's why she's here. But for the moment, I just want to say welcome, Christine. Thanks for being here. Super excited to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the invite.
And I should say that you are a certified parenting and family coach, not just parenting, family as well. Okay, so I want to kind of dig into this because I thought it was very interesting. And then I guess we're just going to see how this goes like we always do on the podcast. So when we were talking, you were talking a lot about your work with parents and really helping them to raise their children. Obviously, as people get into difficult situations, challenges, that's a lot of times why they hire a coach. But one of the things particularly that we were talking about was the fact that, there's no manual for this. There's no real guidebook on what it's like to raise children. And anybody that's raised children knows that. But even inside of that, there was this one area that really stood out to me, and it was around single parenting, and particularly fathers or men that were single parents raising children. And so that's what I'm hoping to kind of dig into, because I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there that are doing that. I had one of my best friends. He's been a single dad, raising a beautiful little girl. She's 3 years old, and it's tough. And I don't want to put down or discount single moms at all. I was raised by a single mom. It's an amazing a gift that my mom gave to me. But I feel like single dads are kind of a step down from that. They're paid attention to even less. So maybe we can start there, Christine, a little bit with what's your experience been like there, working particularly with dads in this whole process?
Absolutely. We talked about this a little bit, and I believe and know it is much harder for single dads than it is for moms. Part of that is just the difference between men and women. Women are just more apt to, find those clusters, find, support, just tend to do that more easily than men. Also, I feel that men, unfortunately, are minimized quite a bit nowadays. And it really grieves my soul. I don't like how they're portrayed on TV. It's like, oh, thank God mom is here because, dad can't do anything right. And, it does translate, into society. And I'm working with the Madison University here about getting the idea of, it's always kind of call your mom or ask your mom or what did your mom say, and bringing it more back to mom and dad or dad and mom, and, not leaving that out. That, so I think that societal piece isn't helpful. And, also is that vulnerability piece is a little bit more challenging. And I'm generalizing.
Yeah.
But overall, it's a little more challenging for men. And I've asked them, I said, what's the most difficult part of this? They go through my course and they're like, boy, that wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I said, I will take that compliment to the bank. But again, I was like, what was the most difficult part about it? And they said, it's being vulnerable, letting your guard down and being okay with, I can't do it all. There's some things I really don't, get, and that's okay. And I can find help with that. So that, that's the big piece, is that, becoming vulnerable enough to ask for help, to accept the help, and then, to change.
Okay. So I want to put a partial pin into vulnerability because I want to come back. I think that, and I know we talked about this a little bit, but so much about what I'm coaching men around and how I'm engaging men, it's the fear of being vulnerable to open up and admit struggle, weakness. But before we get there, because I think that part of this is going to play back into it, because you're the woman, you opened up the good can of worms. So we're going to go with it for a minute. And it's around, I say it all the time. It's just nice to have a woman validate it. But there is such a minimization of, there is a demonization in many regards of manhood, men. And so in your work, in your own experience, where do you think a lot of that has come from?
I think it's such, oh my gosh, it's such a mess of us becoming more aware of women being downplayed, right? And that passion of, let's get equal pay for women, feminism. I always say I'm like the worst feminist ever. I agree with that, but not at the expense of minimizing somebody else. And we know that in any society, when a personhood is minimized, the results are never good. Never good. We're kind of seeing it play out with Russia and Ukraine. And I know that's like a dramatic, but I think we all get it, right? It's because Ukraine is minimized that Russia feels they can do what they're doing. It never plays out well when somebody's minimized. That is the piece that I don't care for, is that we feel like we've had to minimize men, we have had to demonize men to lift us up, and that just never works. Go
ahead.
There's both. I just, unfortunately, I feel that these horrible stories of men mistreating women get publicized so much. Let me tell you, I work intimately with families, and it's both sides, man. I have really seen some women just like, I'm going, how is a mom? Can you treat your children like that? Use them as a pawn. And it's unfortunate the way things get publicized, that also shifts our thinking. And that is really unfortunate.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate you saying that. I'm raising two young daughters, and it's so interesting to me because I feel like that by and large, it's far easier to raise girls right now. because we are living in a society, while we still have a lot of work to do and a lot of room to go. It's interesting. We are recording this on International Women's Day. It won't go live for a while, but I feel like there has been such an amazing work done to empower women, to elevate women. There is a significant recognition of the need to continue to do that. There is an eye on in good ways on the deficiencies in investing into women in many areas. But all of that awareness has created a significant opportunity for women to grow and for women to be a equal part of society today. Whereas raising young boys today, they are in many ways the enemy. It's like they're being looked at as like you're part of the problem. And I'm thinking to myself, especially if I was a parent, okay, maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, and in the different generations, different things happened, but there was a significant mistreatment by men and toxic masculinity. And I mean, the original rise of feminism was out of the result of a need to elevate women at a time when men were mistreating and pushing women down. So like, I see why we went in the direction that we did, but it's like the men of this generation, from young boy all the way up to even like dads and stuff like that, like we're paying the price for things that we didn't participate in. And yet we're trying to do our best. So yeah, I mean, it's so hard. And then I think that kind of relates to the vulnerability piece, because as men are trying to find their place in society, they're trying to find their identity. They become hesitant to really put themselves out there to stand up as a strong man, and not just physically strong, but mentally strong and emotionally strong. And so there's just a lot of fear that now goes into men stepping into the arena and living out their calling and living out their role.
Absolutely. And I'm like, you just hit the topic that I really love digging into. So I'm like on the edge of my chair, to share on this. And, as I said, as a woman, I'm just going to be, I'll probably get some blowback for this. I know as a woman, and I'll own it as myself, Brene Brown does an excellent job of also bringing this to the surface, that as a woman, I do want to see men as strong. I always wanted to see my spouse as strong and, the one I could count on, and, when things were falling apart, and I have to admit, there were times when I saw my spouse crumble, and I'm going to use the word, a little bit of disdain I felt. Mm-hmm. And that's on me. That is on me. And I will say that I've owned it, and I'm going to say boldly, it's out there. Talk to enough women too, that we aren't necessarily very good at handling those type of emotions when they come from a man. And until we as women can really embrace that and appreciate that, I don't blame guys for having, their guard up. And one of the things I talk about a lot, and this has become a passion of mine, especially with the research that we're seeing of adverse childhood experiences, emotional, childhood neglect, and how it affects our parenting and our lives, is that whenever you get an emotion from your child, from a friend, from whoever, view it as a gift. Whether it's a positive emotion or a negative emotion, you just received a gift. How are you going to treat it? And until we learn to do that with everybody, and especially with the guys in our life, and make it a safe place, we can't, it's not fair for us to get angry about it or disappointed, or to say, my male person in my life doesn't show any emotion or whatever. I am telling you, It's because they haven't had a safe place to do that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, counseling, so many couples over the years, as a pastor, and even now post serving in that role. And still so many people come to me, this is often the place that people struggle so much, right? It's they don't know how, and it goes in both directions, because the man doesn't know how to deal with his emotions. He keeps them in, and in many ways he's been told to do that or not taught how to express them. On the other side, a woman is traditionally told that you get to wear them outside of yourself. That's who you are, which it's great, right? But when one is so extremely one way and one is extremely the other way, and no one knows how to deal with the opposite way things are done, it's hard to meet in the middle and figure out how to nurture those things and work them together.
Yeah. One of the tool that I have been using so much more, and I've been really looking at like a broad range with the adults, and then, kid coaching has become more in my purview. And it's like, okay, so how can I use this? It's called an emotional color wheel. I have my favorite one. There's some out there. It's really easy to Google. And it has been so powerful. And I typically work with boys. I don't know what it is. It's definitely a God thing. I had a boy. My foster son was a boy. Every family that I've worked with, I don't really, I know they have kids, but typically they always have boys. It's been crazy. I'm just like, I'm getting it, God, I get it. But I've been using this emotional color wheel, and, you start with a pretty basic emotion in the middle that everybody can easily pick. And then you start working, and the emotions get more complex as you go to the outside of the wheel. It is so powerful. I gave this to Sean Purnell. Him and I did a seminar together on parenting, and it just like blew his mind. And this helps. It's a two-way thing. It's so powerful because, for one, when you're working with somebody, you make assumptions, right, about how you think that they're feeling. And this is a lot of, especially in couples, the disconnect happens. I'm assuming what your feeling is, and then I'm trying to fix the assumption. And that just does not work well. So using this, so simple. Anybody can use it. You just walk out and you're like, okay, which one of these words are hitting what you're feeling? Which one of these words? And I got to the outside, and this kiddo I was working with, and I'm assuming that he's frustrated with his writing. Like, this is the core issue that we're dealing with. You're frustrated. This little boy, it was embarrassment. That's what's holding him back. He knows he's slower than everybody else, and he's embarrassed. So I'm trying to fix something that's not the issue, and if we can start exploring our emotions, getting more accurate words on what we're actually feeling. And then as us as individuals, when somebody gives you an emotion, look at it as a gift, because then you don't feel the need to fix it right away.
Yep.
Or have to do something.
So I have to imagine then, on the parenting side of things, and I've experienced this myself, but I want to hear kind of your experience through it. So you have the opportunity to work with these children. It's typically young boys. The parents are coming to you because they have a need, right? Some need as it relates to better parenting their children. And so you're working with the parents, you're working with the children. So how often do you see miscommunication between the adults as being a big or primary challenge in why these kids are struggling the way that they are?
100%.
I wasn't expecting that, but that's good. That's good.
It is 100% a communication issue. I mean, and that's really, what it's all about is if you really break it down, I'm teaching communication to build deeper relationship. And then when you have deeper relationship, then you can influence your kids. And what people or what parents want to do, and I'll own it. I did it until I started learning all this stuff. I'd like to say that, boom, I had a kid and I was the perfect parent. Not so much. I mean, my story it's hard for me to tell of what took me to make that turn of like, this isn't good. But parents want to take and go, I want to influence my kid, and they're focused on that. And we assume that influencing our kids and training our kids and all that equals, well, punishing them when they're not doing what we want. And we don't necessarily, we make an assumption. we all know what happens with assumptions. We're assuming we have a relationship with our kids because they're our kids. Okay? We do. But is it a good one? Is it a healthy one? Those are questions we don't ask. We're just assuming I have this relationship and now I can influence them.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
That is not the case. There are some pieces that we have to do first. And then, and I look at it this way, then you have the privilege to influence them.
That's so
okay,
good.
There we go. I get on my soapbox.
No, that's so good. That's so good. Okay.
With dads too, there's so much, of, well, I'm supposed to be emotionally, I don't want to say intelligent, but like I'm supposed to handle these emotions, but yet I feel like, I have to be the hammer and, I'm the one that makes things happen. And how does that all work? And to be able, just to help them realize your dad voice isn't yelling. Okay, your dad voice needs to be influential. And how can you do that? I had to learn, I grew up in a household of yelling. I mean, my dad was abusive. That's just how we did things. And that was part of my turning point when I saw my son learning that from me. Now, like people couldn't even imagine that I would ever yell. I mean, I do have a firm voice, and I teach parents how to have your firm and calm voice. But when you're yelling, and this is always a mind blower, when you're yelling, you are not in control. Your kid is.
Ooh, that was good.
Yeah, because you're not in control. And a dad voice doesn't have to be yelling. A dad voice can be very influential. And that's what I, love teaching them and helping them understand. And, just seeing those light bulbs go off. And same with mom, there's moms in this too. And it's like, I think with moms that, the yelling, the dads feel like, this is what dads do. We yell, we're the fist. And with moms, they're kind of in this other category of like, I feel the only time they'll listen to me is if I yell. And, going, I can't yell. How long do you think I would be hired by a family if I was yelling at their kids?
Yeah.
So it's like, you can do this, because I have to do this.
Yeah.
I'm going to teach you how to do it.
Okay. So I have an interesting question to ask you. I think it's interesting. But this can be a landmine. And so you get to choose how you step on it. So I shared earlier that I was raised by a single mom. I saw my dad every other weekend, and he did the best he could for the most part at trying to influence and raise. But my dad was very strict. He was a yeller. My mom was super soft, just almost like doormat at times. She was a very strong woman, but when it came to like parenting, she tried, but she would just lay down. Just the compassion and empathy kind of took over. Anyway, so later on in life, I recognized what the deficiency in having a strong male voice, leader, influencer in my home did. If it was to the strength and aggression of my dad, I think that would have done damage in a different direction if my dad was there full time. So deficiency. On the other side of things, I know and I have seen that the absence of a mom, so single dad raising a child, there's a huge deficiency in how that child is raised because they're missing the nurture of the mom. Like there are these, as much as society wants to reject this, right? There are these natural characteristics and tendencies that God's created us with, and we express. So how do you, if you agree with that statement, how do you help to educate single parents to try and make up for those in light of the fact that they kind of can't.
They can't. I agree 100% with what you're saying. They can't. And I recommend for every couple that's thinking, now there are good, healthy co-parenting couples out there. This is more for if you're really doing it alone, or, the other spouse is in and out. And I do want to clarify, I have seen my clients are about 50-50 on this.
Okay.
Where it's the dad and the mom is exiting or in and out or wacky. And then where it's the mom and it's the dad, exiting out and wacky. So what I recommend is for a mom to tap in to Boys and Girls Club, big brothers, big sisters. Find that, good, strong, mentor of the opposite sex. I also recommend, as sometimes hard as it is when you're a single person, to see a happy married couple, make friends with them. So your kids can see that, especially if this is something, that you desire and you don't want your kids to make the same, mistakes that, that you did. That's one thing that I was thankful for when I went through, divorcing my son's dad, is that we were in a very steeped Christian church, and he had a lot of friends that had parents with healthy, relationships. Same thing for a dad. Tap into Boys and Girls Club, tap into Big Brothers and Big Sisters, you that good. And I always recommend outside of your family, don't let grandma fill that role, or, your sister or whatever. Find somebody outside of that. And same thing, make some friends, with some couples to, so your kids, can see that dynamic. Because if you really desire to want that your children to have healthy marriages, they need to see it.
Yeah.
Just own it. Like right now, you can't show that, somebody else can.
Okay. So there was something really interesting you said in there. So when you said, try not to have that be family, because I think, again, like that's who immediately steps in. And obviously you need all the help you can get, especially if you've been on the raw end of the deal, and you're hurt and you were left maybe without, or you're working full time and you're trying to take care of your child, and parents there, or like your parents there, so grandparents there, or whatever. So why do you feel like there is some maybe not dangers? Why do you feel like there's benefit to going outside of the family to have influence into the children?
For one, I don't believe it's fair to grandma and grandpa to take on all that weight. They did their job. They raised you. They want to be grandma and grandpa. Are they going to step in? Typically they will. But I just truly believe that's not fair. Let them be grandma and grandpa. The other part is the kids, as they get older, especially in their teen years, I really recommend that you find your kid a mentor outside of the family as well. Somebody that you trust, that they can talk to, my parents are awful and crappy and they're ruining my life, type of a thing. And to be able where they can have that safe place to vent, and then just have somebody go, yeah, I get it, but then, you obviously are going to trust like a mentor from one of those places or whatever to come back around and say, but is it really that, like you have this for that. So for one, I just don't think it's fair to put all that weight onto your family. And it's also very beneficial for a kid to know they have like this uber safe place just to vent and puke all their stuff out. I mean, we all have friends like that.
Yeah.
To get those emotions out.
Okay. So, kind of practically, I guess. So as what are some of the challenges that you see parents facing I think every parent can use support. And so, definitely a community of people around you. And church is such a great place for that to happen, or can be. But what are kind of like the signs or the moments when you start to say, maybe you should engage with a parenting coach, or a coach for your children, when you're starting to, or, when you're starting to have those challenges?
So of course mine is going to be, everybody needs a parenting coach. I mean, it's like life coaching, counseling, or whatever. As your parents weren't perfect. They did the best they could with what they know how. So much we have learned, like what we thought was good for kids back when I was growing up. I mean, it would be appalling. Now, this spanking, right? I grew up as a spanking kid, and now we see the adverse, effects that had. I mean, I came out okay, but we're finding that if you take this learning mentality and help your kids learn through experience, they are so much healthier, so much more resilient, as they grow up. And so mine, typically parents are coming to me because they feel a disconnect, with their kids, or, they've reached the end of their rope and they're just like, I can't figure this out. I would say that if you are at any moment in your parenting cocking your head and going, I don't think this is working, reach out, find a book on it, reach out to a parenting coach. I mean, most of us as coaches have programs, but we also do that individual. Not everybody really needs to go through my whole program. They really just need to have a couple of sessions, and we tweak a couple things out. But it's helpful that, and with coaching, what's great about it is we kind of dig in and we help you discover those ahas. And a lot of times it's something the parent is doing that's triggering, the kid, and then it makes it all messy. So, and that's why I do personally. I'll throw this out there: never trust a coach who doesn't have a coach. And I have a coach. And, there's times when I'm getting stuck with the business, and as soon as I'm feeling like, I don't know what to do, it's like, yep, let's get an appointment on the books.
Yep.
So
that's so good. That's so good. Okay. I think that it's super helpful, and it can definitely hear. I mean, we talked a lot about, our own experience. And obviously at the end here, we're talking about the fact that, our parents weren't perfect. We weren't raised perfectly. In the beginning, we were talking about, we are kind of tainted by what society is telling us, both in how to live our own lives, how to parent our kids or not parent our kids. So there's a lot of noise out there, bad information, not the best information. And so what are some very simple, practical things that you recommend to parents as they are like, there's a mom or there's a dad listening right now that's like, oh my gosh, I'm so frustrated. I don't know what to do. Maybe my spouse and I aren't communicating well. And so what are some kind of simple things that you suggest that people do? Maybe even before. I know the ideal thing, I would say the same thing, like hire a coach. But before they get there, what are some simple things that you feel like people can do?
So I'll give you, I got, kind of 3 biggies that can really start repairing, and build deeper relationship. The first one is this language that it took me about 2 years to really develop. And it's super powerful. And it's taking because typically when we come at our kids and we're frustrated, we have the word you in there and we have the word why in there. And immediately our kids are on defense. Anybody's on defense, right? When you use the word why. So I was like, is there a way we can get to the truth or get understanding without putting somebody on defense? So the language is, help me understand what is or was going on with ... And I am so this has been 2 years in development, and I've, probably, so 3 years that I've been using this language. I have yet to be lied to. And I've used it on my adult friends. I've used it on a 2-year-old. Did I understand what came out of that kiddo's mouth? But it was amazing. She was just having a super meltdown. And I just said, honey, help me understand what's up. And she just like rattled all this out. And I said, are you feeling better? I play. And I'm like, okay, cool. You can't not be like, want to share when somebody's made it that safe for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you, as a parent, that's a gift. So be careful, because sometimes it may be that they're mad at you. Really be careful when you get that. But that language is so powerful. And when you take that time to listen and understand what they're feeling, talk about becoming an attractive parent. I mean, you're going to build deep relationship. The other thing along with that, we are so busy with our kids. We keep them so busy that I recommend on a weekly basis, a minimum of 20 minutes. If you can do it more, great. Where you have what's called a relationship anchor. And I've actually started taking my own advice and doing these anchors with my friends because I'm so busy. Where it is a safe place that they can count on it. Say it's Saturday mornings from 8 to 8:20. I'm going to be at the kitchen table. We'll do breakfast. You can always count on me being there. And just make it a safe place for them to talk. This is not an opportunity to bring your agenda. It's not an opportunity to fix things. But man, talk about being able to repair and deepen relationship and learn things. You're like, oh, that's why you were such a pain in the butt. Like this happened I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
That happened. That understanding, that you will gain is just, just unbelievable. And thirdly, always look for the best in your kids. Always approach them as the person they could be, not the behavior that you're seeing. Like, hey, I know you're a really helpful kid. Help me understand what's going on with not cleaning your room. Then going at them and yelling and, you're lazy and here we go again and you're not doing anything. Speak over them who you ultimately know they are and who they can be. Everybody flourishes when that happens.
That's so good.
There's my top 3.
No, I mean, I think it's great. I mean, I think there's so much power in every single one of those situations. I definitely, I love them. I think that the reason that the second one stood out to me so much is that, society used to be so much slower, and there's a lot of blessing in innovation, growth, speed, but there was a point in society when the dinner table was the staple every night, right? Every single night of the week, family sat around the dinner table. And I know that, movies it's portrayed as the dad had the newspaper up in front of his face and, mom was just serving the whole time. But really, that was the time that everybody sat down together and had conversation. What's going on in your day? How are you feeling? What are you doing? We fast forward to today, and particularly as it relates to kids. And when you have kids in any kind of activities have become a 5, 6, 7 day a week commitment in which there is no more static, consistent time to sit down. And so I love the fact that, my gut reaction is don't be so invested into those things because you're losing it. You're losing that relationship. But I think yours is better because it's hard to just pull back from what society is pulling you into as it relates to all these time commitments and investments. But to be able to say, look at, for whatever reason, we can't do this on a consistent basis, but once a week, twice a week, this is going to be our round table. And I think that's such a simple practice. I know for our family, even now I have a 20-year-old and a 12-year-old, and at least at least 4, typically 5, and sometimes 6 nights a week, we have dinner together. All at the same time, phones are down, and we try our best to have phones down. Sometimes somebody has to get told to put it down. And it's usually not the kids. But it's become such a staple, and it's so beneficial because then we're always in tune with what's going on. Even if somebody was pissed off from the night before or earlier in the day, they have to come to the dinner table and face everybody else. And so that just flushes it out. So I love that. I love that you said that. I think it's all super wise, but I just love that one as a simple practice to push back against the busyness of today.
Yeah. I can just attest to, it's like I go into these families and stuff like that. Sometimes I don't always know, how what's happening, once I go. I mean, I always stay in contact, but, a couple of things of how I can say how powerful this is. So with my son, I do recommend more, like a little bit more refined and individual, but back, when we were raising my son, we had poker night on Sunday night. So we played poker ever since he was little, have, Pete's the Goldfish, and then we would watch Extreme Home Makeover. And that has been so, like, he's 28 now. He's turning 28 tomorrow. And guess what he wants to do for his birthday? Like every year, go out to dinner. Just to go out to dinner and talk. Like that just, built this instill in him to have that time and to go out to dinner. So I'm telling you, it's worth the effort because it builds something in there that they crave. And do you know how cool it is when you call your 28-year-old son who's single, in the military and, bands going on and everything else and goes, Mom, I just want to go to dinner with you. It's awesome. And, there's so much that can be learned. And, this could be a whole nother episode. You can go to my website, and in the blogs, I wrote an article about, forging leaders one meal at a time. I mean, so much can be learned, around a dinner table. So let's bring back dinner.
I love it. It's making me hungry right now. It's almost dinner time for me. Well, Christine, I mean, I'm super thankful for the fact that, we had the chance to connect, to have a conversation like this, to scratch the surface on, single parenting and the challenges that they're facing. I think, discussing just parenting in general and how more often than not, it's a communication breakdown between the parents. It really has nothing to do with the kids, even when the kids are having problems, but then even kind of just landing with just these final, I want to say simple, yet I know so difficult at times, practical ways in which we can become better parents, to stay more engaged, to raise our kids in the way that we really desire to. So thank you so much. I mean, it's been a great conversation. Just love it.
If I do have a free gift for your listeners. So cool. If they go to parentinggamewins.com, they'll have a pop-up. And once they put in their email, they will get a free parenting playbook.
Awesome.
So it has some more strategies in there, and it's a nice PDF that will just pop up right away, and they can download it, and it will have some more strategies in there.
Awesome. And we'll make sure to put that in the show notes too, so they can just click that link and go. Well, thank you again. I so appreciate it. Guys, if you enjoyed this episode today, if you want to connect more with Christine, you have a question, a thought, a concern, if you're ready to hire somebody because you are in dire need and you feel like she said the right things, please make sure to connect with her. Like I said, all of her contact information will be in the show notes to be able to do that. If you have any questions for me, thoughts, feedback, whatever it may be, you always know where to find me. Until next time, be you, be happy, be authentic. Thanks, guys. Chat soon. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Authentic Conversations. If you are ready to live the life you've dreamed of, I'm here to help. Head to ryanjamesmiller.com/podcast to begin your journey. And if this episode impacted you in any way, pay it forward by sharing it with someone you know. I'm Ryan James Miller, and I'll see you next time on Authentic Conversations.